Hi, 7th grade. Here are your answers to the second part of the 6.32 column notes. First question is, what was the Indian Removal Act? This should have been a definition for you. It was that the government set aside Native American lands beyond the Mississippi River, and this act was passed in 1830. Now, Jackson was a huge supporter of the Indian Removal Act. As a matter of fact, he was one of the big components of getting it passed through Congress, meaning both the House and the Senate. His reasoning behind it is that he believed that moving Native Americans west would bring a permanent resolution to the conflict between Native Americans and whites. Now, you have to remember, Jackson grew up on the frontier. He was used to the fact that Native Americans and whites constantly had conflicts and were bickering over land. So he personally felt that this was what was needed to be done in order to solve this problem. So he decided to have Native Americans removed from their lands in the South and put into Indian Territory. Now, Indian Territory was a chunk of land that was created out of the Louisiana Purchase, which the United States got from France in the mid-1800s. And it is located in what is present-day Oklahoma. Now, you have to remember what this would have been like for these Native American tribes. They lived in the South. There was a lot of lush forests. They were farmers. The land in Oklahoma was not very good for farming, so a lot of these Native American tribes struggled once they got to Indian Territory. And then you had 4 different Native American groups, and you had to analyze how they were forced off their land. So the first group would have been the Choctaw, and you should have found that they signed the first treaty with the U.S. government in 1830, and this treaty allowed them to stay on their land, but to give up their customs and adapt European ones. And I told you this before, that a lot of Native Americans, in order to stay where they were originally from, adapted a lot of white ways, so to speak. The Chickasaw, they helped out for payment for their lands before they would agree to move, meaning they waited to be paid for the land before they would leave it. And the U.S. government failed to pay them and made them move anyway, so go figure, right? The Cherokee, they also tried to hold out for payment, but they were eventually told to relocate by President Van Buren. Now, a lot of people tend to think that Jackson was the only U.S. president that had Native Americans removed from the land. That is not necessarily true. As a matter of fact, President Van Buren also played a huge role in removing Native Americans from their lands as well. And the last group is the Seminole. They originally were one of the only groups to resist the U.S. government's attempts to relocate them. As a matter of fact, they actually fought a 10-year war against the U.S. Army. But they ended up losing because, the U.S. Army is a lot stronger than they were. And they were eventually moved to Indian Territory. As a matter of fact, they were the last group that were moved to Indian Territory. So if you have any questions, please just let me know.